Now it's time to get into the heart of what makes you better as a triathlete. Last video I talked about some of the immediate and really important changes you can make right away to gain time very quickly in the sport related to equipment and transition. And in the first video, if you remember, we talked about your goals and why the sport is important to you and achieving those goals. So, but really those goals that you set out in the beginning, the heart of meeting them and what separates professionals from elites and age groupers is what I'm going to go over in this video today. So if you really listen carefully, take notes, you will start to see the habits and things that professionals are doing in form and fitness that are helping them get to the next level as a triathlete. And first I'd like to go over form. And I'm just going to describe how professionals approach each discipline in the sport versus age groupers and elites approach it. And when I go over form, it's really important to understand that you only have a certain amount of time and energy to spend on the sport. Even professionals who spend 25, 30 plus hours in the sport, they have finite energy. And if you focus on form relentlessly in each discipline, that energy is going to be spent more efficiently. Less of it will be spent to get more impact in each discipline. So I'm going to go over each discipline in detail and just describe what professionals are doing, and then you can evaluate whether or not you're doing those things and what you'd be able to implement from their habits. Because really this is about habits of highly successful triathletes and what they're doing. So in swimming, professionals are absolutely relentless in working on their form as well as putting in the miles that they need to in order to get those elite times. And a Defense Advanced Research Project Agency study, DARPA, said that most human beings are 97% inefficient in the water. And even Michael Phelps, who's probably the greatest swimmer in history at this point, is 90% inefficient in the water. When you compare that to dolphins that are 60–70% efficient, and for the simple reason humans are just not aquatic beings, they're not designed to swim naturally. And what professionals do differently and habitually in their training is a couple things. First of all, they measure their efficiency. They measure their stroke count, so they're going to count their strokes on laps. And they're also one of the greatest inventions, according to Terry Laughlin, the founder of Total Immersion Swimming, in the last 10 or 15 years, has been the tempo trainer, which allows you to put a small beep in your ear and keep your tempo rhythmically dialed in while you're going across the pool. So if you are counting your strokes and maintaining a stroke count of 15, and every other workout you're able to drop your tempo just 1/100th of a second and make small incremental changes, you're actually training your neurological systems to do the same thing just as efficiently, just a little bit faster. And there's a lot of exercises and workouts and drills that you can do with a tempo trainer that will allow you to play with and find your ideal tempo. And once you find your ideal tempo, how to moderate and sometimes speed it up when you need to early in the race, and then settle into that steady tempo later in the race. And Mark Allen at a recent triathlon research camp talked about how most triathletes struggle with this concept of panic start. And I said to Mark, you know, age groupers are all terrified of the swim start, and he looked at me and said, so are professionals. And what he said was, you should know your tempo and what you should be swimming at, and just know that intuitively because you've measured it. And then when you go out on racing, understand that your body, but due to adrenaline, is going to churn a lot faster than you realize, and to be aware of that and consciously slow down a little bit your stroke as you go out so that you don't overexert yourself at the beginning of the swim start. So professional triathletes count their laps, They use a tempo trainer, which is the greatest invention in recent swimming technology history. All the other things that some pros do and don't use are great, training tools and paddles and boards and everything, but probably the best invention, and the one that everyone agrees is revolutionizing swimming, is a tempo trainer. They also practice open water swimming. They practice swim starts regularly, at least on a weekly basis. They practice sighting, they practice swimming in packs, so that when they get in the water, these things, the pool swimming is not open water swimming, it's not triathlon race swimming, it's a training tool to train your fitness and your stroke, but when you get in the water, it's a whole new type of race or type of swimming than what you would do swimming a traditional swim meet. So that's what professionals do. And if you look at the checklist I have, elites aren't doing all of those things. They're doing some of them, but not all of them. And then finally, age groupers really are missing out on a lot of this. And a lot of age groupers believe that I just need to put in as much mileage as the pros, and that's really not going to get you to their level, because they're swimming smarter, they're training smarter, they're getting a lot more out of their workouts. So before you add a ton of yardage to your swim, why not adapt some of these habits? Get a tempo trainer, start learning how to count your strokes, start working with a coach to get more efficient workouts and better workouts as you go forward. The next discipline after swimming, the easiest one to make some immediate improvements on, is your running. Now running, unlike swimming, Bobby McGee, 6-time Olympic running coach, famously said, running is primal. It's your first language. You do it before you talk. And it's so natural, whereas swimming, according to Terry Laughlin, is so unnatural. And how do you become a better runner? And it's not about figuring out, like in the swim stroke, the perfect running form. It's about uncovering your natural running form based on your leg length, based on your peculiarities of your body type. You have to run your own unique way, but over the years, from when you're a child, you used to run naturally as a child, and then due to injury and habit and modern life, you've added these things that make you less efficient as a runner. And studying under people like Bobby, I've realized that the key that professional triathletes are trying to do is make their running form as efficient as possible, because they're doing the swim and the bike and these other things that are twisting their body around a bit. And how do you integrate all three disciplines, especially the run, and become most efficient? So what are runners doing these days that elites are not doing? They're running with a cadence sensor where they can sense their cadence as a runner. And there's a huge debate out there right now, according to Bobby McGee. A lot of people are getting hung up on forefoot striking versus heel striking, midfoot striking. He says none of that's important. What's really important as a runner is that you run at 90 beats a minute, meaning your left foot hits the ground at least 90 times in a minute. And the most common denominator of efficient running triathletes is that they're running at a high turnover. So typically in the 96 to 98 range is what professional triathletes are running at, but anyone who's running at 90 beats or more as an age group or an elite, you can count on being as efficient as your body should be as a runner. And that's one of the fundamentals. The other one is make sure when you're running, it doesn't really matter where your foot strikes as much as you strike your feet underneath your center of gravity. Because if you're heel striking, according to Bobby McGee, it's okay as long as it's underneath your body. But if you're reaching out with your heel, then that's going to cause a big problem. So what you want to do, and what pro triathletes do, is they get gait analysis. They film themselves, they have someone evaluate that. They train with a cadence meter, they train with heart rate monitor, so that they can evaluate their heart rate and make sure that they're not overexerting themselves in relation to their workouts. They also focus on their forward lean, and then finally what they do to help unlock their running form is they do drills. They do plyometrics, dynamic warm-ups, stretches, and all these things that will help you emphasize and show your body how to run more naturally. And then the final discipline in that, and one that I think a lot of people actually overlook, is your biking, your cycling form. Well, how can you have form on a bike? Because you're pretty locked in. But that brings me back to the point that I made earlier, when we talked about equipment, which is if you have a poor bike fit, and bike fits are really hard to get right, so you need to have someone who really knows what they're doing. Retool is a system that I highly recommend. But if you just went to the store, bought a bike, and they sat you down and did a few measurements, that's not a bike fit. A bike fit is a 2 to 3 hour process which shows you exactly and measures based on precise measurements and also feedback from you and how it feels. It shows you how to get the most power out of your body. If you are not in the right position, especially in an aerodynamic position on your bike, if you're locked into an inefficient position, you're going to get back pain, you're going to get injured, you're going to potentially flare out your knees because they're not going to be in line with where they should be. And getting the bike fit right is really important. And then once you have the bike fit, professionals get bike fits, and they don't just get one. As they get more fit, you can get a more aggressive bike fit, and they're always checking and tweaking and updating it. Professionals are also going into wind tunnels. Now most amateurs or even elites can't afford to go into a wind tunnel, so you might just emulate what professionals pick in terms of equipment and other things on the bike. Professionals always train with power on the bike. They now are all training with power. Seton Claggett, my friend at Trisport, says having a power meter on your bike while racing or training is like taking a test with the answer key. It is just such a huge intelligence tool that you can use, or more importantly, your coach can use, someone who really understands fitness, to measure and moderate and regulate your training. So all professional triathletes have a bike fit, constantly updating their bike fit based on injuries, how they feel, how they're progressing in their fitness. They have a wind tunnel test done to make sure all their equipment is right. They're training with power meters. They're also training with heart rate to match their heart rate versus their power, and those are just more data points that they can use. And then they work on indoor trainers during the winter. If you want to really work on form and your feel on the bike, sometimes the best thing to do is to do a little bit of trainer work to make sure that you are really in touch with, especially in bad weather, that you're really in touch with your fitness indoors, but also you can get some different sensations and feedback from an indoor workout versus when you're out on the road and you have the wind and these other things to help break up the monotony of a ride. So that's what professionals are doing on the bike in order to maximize their form and their function and their fitness. So the next thing, the fourth part of the checklist, is fitness. And fitness is, once you have locked in each discipline and the form and the equipment and the different tools that you need, then you need to translate that over the course of a training plan into your fitness. And if you are not fit, if you're not physiologically in the same ballpark as the top professionals or anyone that you're competing against, you just don't have it. You're just starting race day without a chance, because even if you want to get there, your body's just not going to take you there because you've got limits. So the purpose of training is to give you the physiological tools to get to race day and have a chance. And we'll talk about racing next and what the big secret is to racing according to our research. But I just want to describe what professionals are doing from a training perspective in order to achieve the results that they get. First of all, they have a plan. Most age group triathletes wake up in the morning and just think, well, what am I going to do today? And they go do it. They sign up for races on a whim. They don't really have a plan on, especially a season plan on what they're going to do. All professionals at the beginning of the year sit down with their coach and map out their entire season. And they start with their objectives. So if your objective is to make this time on a certain distance or go to this race and place or podium in that, you have to plan that. You have to say, okay, well, based on my goal, let me backwards plan how do I get there. So that is what's known as an A race. And then based on that A race, what a coach will do, or a professional coach will sit down and do with you is say, okay, that's your A race. So what kind of races do we plan throughout the season in order to get you to that A race. So you're going to have some B races. B races are races that you don't necessarily taper as much for. An A race, the championship race, you're actually going to taper, and there's a detailed taper plan that you need to do in order to get ready for that and have your peak performance in that one race. But if you taper for every race because you want to do well at every race, what's going to happen? You're not going to get the training you need throughout the entire year to peak at that A race. So you have to categorize different races differently. B races are ones that you're not going to taper for as much. They're going to be ones that you might focus instead on your placement or the end state. You're going to focus on a certain objective. C races at the beginning of the season or even throughout the season are races that you don't taper for at all. You just go in and you almost treat them like training events. You don't care about the placing as much as, you know, I'm going to use this sprint triathlon to work on my transition times, or I'm going to use this course to work on my hill work because I know that my A race has hills, and this setting is a lot like my A race setting. So there's going to be different goals and objectives for each race, and once you've got that map and you actually put these events on the calendar and pay for these events so that you know that you're locked in to go into them, then what professionals do is they plan blocks of training to get them to each race's training objective. So if my objective on this race is hills, I'm going to have my power or my strength phase before that so that I can use the hills to validate it. If my objective on this race is working on my swim or my top end speed, then I'm going to use this. This is going to be something I do at the end of a speed block of training. And phases are typically 6 to 8 weeks of training that you'll do. And a race is a great way at the end of that phase to test and give you a goal to move towards in order to validate that training phase and move on to the next one. And then when you think about phases of a season, what triathletes are doing, professionals, is it's called periodization. And there's a lot of debate about whether periodization is a valid concept anymore, or there's another one called reverse periodization. But the key to thinking about these phases is every phase has an objective, whether you believe in base phase at the beginning of the season or the season before in the out season, or speed phases or power phases. All these different levels of training need to be defined, and it's a strategy, and there's no perfect strategy out there. No coach has a monopoly on the perfect training planning. They're all just looking at their athletes and doing the best that they can. And what you need to do as a triathlete is understand what your goals are, what races you need to do in order to get to those goals, and then the training that you need to fit into that. So if you'd like to go to the next level in training, you have to plan out your season. You have to set phases that make sense and have key objectives in those phases. Then after that, you need to have a training plan mapped out for each day. You need to know your swim, bike, and run metrics that you're trying to achieve. You need to then log that information in a database that you or a coach can evaluate and see based on the objectives I set. Am I meeting that? You need to give constant feedback. Write down how you feel after every workout. That diary is important. So all these different habits that professionals do around training, even if you're not training 25, 30, 35 hours a week like they are, you can, by getting with a coach or teaching yourself how to coach yourself a bit, you can get a lot of those same impacts in whatever training time you have available. Even if you're only training 10 hours, if you do all these things, log your workouts, write down your feedback, record your power, record your heart rate, record everything, that's going to have a much better result for you. A plan, and then a metrics related to a plan. That which gets measured, as we used to say in the Army, gets looked at and gets improved. And that's true in any endeavor in life. Is you first have to measure and track things in order to be aware of it and motivated to improve things. So that's how you get to the next level in terms of training. Training really is the heart of showing up so that you can maximize your race day performance. So those are the two main things you can do, form and fitness, in order to get ready for the race. And when you think about racing, that is really where this whole sport comes down to is we love to set goals, we love to achieve them, and you can only do that on race day. So in the next video, what I'm going to talk about is we've gone through this exhaustive inventory of what pros do in order to get to race day. But the next video, we need to talk about how do you become successful on race day itself. What are the mental components to racing? What are the habits that professionals have around racing that make them successful? And then finally, after we go over racing and mental skills, what I want to go over is a complete inventory of you as a triathlete. Go over the goals that you wrote down in the first video, and now that you've been through this entire inventory, look at how have you been spending your time, how have you been spending your money, what have you invested in, what have you not invested in, and how can you change that to possibly either adjust your goals or how can you change what you're doing to meet the goals that you now know you really want to achieve. So in the next video, we'll talk about that. If you'd like to get with a coach right now and speak to him, you can definitely at any time book a free 60-minute coaching call with one of our triathlon research coaches and go over everything. We actually give you an entire PDF download copy, free copy of the checklist inventory that I've just been going over so that you can have that, fill it out, and use it as a planning tool for your journey as a triathlete. So in the final video, watch for that. That's where I'm going to walk you through how to achieve your goals on race day and get the most out of this sport and the journey that you're on. And then what adjustments you might need to make to either those goals or to your means that you're using to get those goals in order to achieve them.